Hey there, YouTube. There's a topic that I need to share with you today. A lot of people have had some misconceptions about what exactly ISIS is and what their goals are. So I think everybody already knows that they do a lot of terrorism. They kill a lot of people. I think everybody already knows that they've carved out some territory for themselves that's about the size of Great Britain over in the Middle East between Iraq and Syria. But when it really comes down to where they came from and what their goals are, I think a lot of people don't quite get it. So we're going to go and do a little bit of history and go back and see where they came from and why they're doing what they're doing and what they how they view the future. So, if you go back to World War I, I'm sure you guys have heard about Lawrence of Arabia. Well, T.E. Lawrence was doing some work with the locals there in the Middle East, and he got them to fight on behalf of the British. Excuse me. And the promise that he made was that if they do this and they fight against the Ottoman Empire, that he promised that they would have a caliphate afterwards. Well, that promise was not upheld. A couple of bureaucrats by the name of Sykes and Picot, British and French, they're the ones that actually drew up the lines and drew up the borders of the countries that we see in the Middle East today. And so that border between Syria and Iraq is known among ISIS as the Sykes-Picot line. And so that's one of the things that really angered a lot of people. And people, especially like ISIS, they tend to live in the past as far as their grievances. They have grievances that go back over 1,000 years that they're still enacting today. If you wonder why it was that they struck France over, Italy or Spain or somebody else that they could have struck a few weeks ago, the answer is that when the Caliphate was invading Europe over 1,000 years ago, they weren't stopped until they reached France. And this is the guys that were invading through Spain. Once they got into France, that's where they were finally stopped. But back to the Sykes-Picot line. They saw that as a slight from the West, where we denied them their caliphate. And so that's why it was really significant to ISIS when they were making their moves towards Mosul, when they put the bulldozers through the berms and everything that were on the border between Syria and Iraq and declared Sykes-Picot is over. When they took Mosul in northern Iraq, there were chants in the streets of Sykes-Picot is dead. That was very significant to them. But why does ISIS exist in the first place? Well, if you go back to the early days of the Iraq War, there was a guy, I believe his name was Anwar al-Awlaki. He was a really nice, likable guy. He's the guy that used to cut off people's heads and put them in baskets of fruit and put some fruit on top of them to hide it and leave that in the market so people find it during the day when they're conducting their business. Really nice guy, of course. He was killed in 2006. But he's the guy that had the vision that actually led to the creation of ISIS. He's the guy that came up with the plan to form this group that would do this work. And it could have died with him, but it didn't, because he had a couple of guys working for him that eventually took on his work and continued it. One of these guys was a former colonel from Saddam Hussein's intelligence service. And he's the guy who actually drew up the plans for the organizational structure of ISIS. So ISIS does have its roots within Al-Qaeda, but it was mainly people within Al-Qaeda who wanted to do something more. Now, their goals were to establish a caliphate, which they have, and eventually that caliphate would start bringing about various Islamic prophecies. They believe that not only those prophecies are true, but you can actually trigger them and make them happen if you cause enough bloodshed. And so the prophecies they're trying to make true are the ones that regard the end of the world. So they believe that that eventually, at some point, they're going to have 80 nations from around the world that are at war with them. That's why they're not too concerned or afraid when country after country decides it wants to jump on the Bomb Syria bandwagon. They're excited about it because it's proving their prophecies correct. So they're waiting until they have 80 nations arrayed against them that are going to fight them at a town called Dabiq. Dabiq is a very, very small farming town in northern Syria. It's just a few buildings and a couple of fields. But it's incredibly significant for ISIS. In fact, they've named their propaganda magazine Dabiq. It's that significant to them. And they believe that once that fight happens at Dabiq and they come out as the winner, then the 12th Imam appears. The 12th Imam is a guy that they call the Mahdi. Now, he was born over 1,000 years ago, according to their legends, but some guys were trying to kill him when he was about 12 years old, and so he went and hid in a well, and he doesn't come back until after the battle happens at Dabiq. And so this is what ISIS believes. And the Mahdi, according to their beliefs, is a guy who unites Islam by the sword, of course, and then eventually destroys Israel, destroys the West, and establishes Islam as the only religion on the planet. And so they're trying to make this happen. Their end goal is Islam is the only religion on the planet, and every human being is either killed or has submitted to Islam. And so they know that these prophecies, if they're true, bring that about. So they're trying to do as much killing right now to grab as much attention from the world as possible so that everybody comes in to fight them and they can have that battle in Dabiq. Now, they're not fighting because of climate change. They're not fighting because of, U.S. foreign policy. They're not fighting because of, there was a power vacuum when we got rid of Saddam and they just suddenly went to do their own thing. And they're not fighting just because, they hate us for our freedom or any of that nonsense. They're fighting because they believe in a prophecy that they think they can make happen. So how do you defeat them? Well, there's only one way to actually defeat them. And this method was proven in the 1890s. In the 1890s, there was a guy in, I believe it was in either Somalia or Ethiopia. But there was a guy who claimed that he was the Mahdi. And he gained a lot of support, gained a lot of followers, and he started taking territory. And some of the other Muslims were very concerned about this. They didn't want to lose their power, of course. But they knew that if he's the Mahdi, he cannot be killed, right? So they said, okay, we're going to prove this true or we're going to prove it to be incorrect right now. So they went and they stabbed him in his sleep. Because they know if they can kill this guy, then he's not the Mahdi. So they killed him. And almost overnight, all of his followers disappeared. His entire power base disappeared. You cannot bomb ISIS out of existence. You cannot put boots on the ground and fight them out of existence. There's always going to remain people who believe that they are, they're true, that is the correct path. There's always going to be people who believe that, especially if you look at their children. They're teaching these kids all of this stuff at a very, very young age. You have 9-year-olds beheading grown men. You have little kids learning how to kill from as young as 5. The indoctrination is so deep into them. You can't just fight it out of them. You have to prove the prophecy to be incorrect. That is the only way you can fight it. And everything about the containment and all of that stuff that the president's been talking about, it doesn't work. You cannot contain an idea. Now, these shooters from San Bernardino that attacked all these people recently, whether they had actual ties to ISIS or not, they did their actions in conscious support of ISIS. And even if there was no communication between them, the idea is not contained because the idea is already out there. It's like trying to take piss out of the ocean. It doesn't happen. So the only way to do it is to prove the idea to be incorrect. Now, whether that's actually fighting them at Dabiq and winning, whether that's killing their caliph, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, or whatever course of action it may be, the only way to defeat them is to find a way to poke a hole in that prophecy and prove it wrong. And why is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi significant? Well, first of all, he runs ISIS. He's their caliph. That's the leader of a caliphate. But not only that, his name is significant. So, in their prophecy, it says that the leader of the caliphate that brings about all of these events in their last days would be named after the original caliph, who was named, guess what? Abu Bakr. He chose that name on purpose. So, I'm not sure what exactly the course of action is that does poke the hole in the prophecy, but that is the only way you can get after it. And if you're wondering whether or not they're going to keep attacking us, yes, of course they are. They're going to keep poking us and poking us and poking us until there's enough of an outcry for war that we go. That's the only way that this is going to happen, if we can't destroy their ideology. They're gonna keep on trying to grab as much attention from as much of the West as possible. They want to fight. I'm not sure if you guys saw the Vice News documentary when ISIS first really appeared in the news, but one of their guys said, "We pray for adversity. We don't want an easy life." So just making life hard for them actually increases their morale. That's what they want. They want the adversity, they want the fight, because they know they're not going to make any progress according to their goals unless there is fighting. So just simply fighting them is not enough. It's not going to fix the problem. You can completely wipe that territory clean of them that they own. You can destroy the organizational structure of the Islamic State, but the ideas will still remain alive, and you'll just have another one later on. And if you destroy that one, you'll have another one. The only possible outcome to do this, to stop the bloodshed, is to destroy their ideologies. If you have any questions or any comments or would like to add something, or maybe I forgot a key point, go ahead and put that in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.